In coming to Rome, I was very interested in knowing what Rome was known for. And we all know Rome's known for a lot of things, and one of its great emperors was Julius Caesar, who had a lot of great sayings. But one of the sayings that he was best known for was that experience as a teacher of life. So I think we're very lucky to have these 4 expert panelists up here. So in asking these questions, I think we'll have a chance to learn from their experience and get some expert advice. There's a wide range of questions here, so I've just clustered some of them. There's some that are similar, so let's focus on this first one, which I think is quite important. And I think this one, Caroline, I'll direct to you because of your role as chair of PODC and your experience as the Kenyan Institute CEO. There's a question here saying, what does a PO do or fledgling PO do if it has no responsibility recognition for examination, qualification, or discipline of accountants? Is it worth strengthening the PAO? If it is, what are its first steps?
Thanks, Sylvia, for that question, and thanks for that very important question. I think one of the roles a PAO has to undertake is to have stakeholder engagement so that they can enhance its relevance. In this case, this is a PAO that doesn't have responsibility for examination, does not have responsibility for disciplinary of its members, and so such a PAO should then engage with the relevant stakeholder. In the initial stage, you try and influence whoever it is who has responsibility for that to undertake the role as you would. But gradually, you try and influence the stakeholder, the government, for example, to transfer that responsibility to the PAO. But at the same time, you as the PAO must demonstrate that you have the capacity to handle that responsibility well. So you do stakeholder engagement, you engage with the government, whoever it is who has the responsibility. And then in that engagement process, you try and explain why the PAO is the one that should have that responsibility. And at the same time, you demonstrate your ability to handle that responsibility well.
Thank you. Another great question, which I think I'll direct to you, Paul. There's a question here saying when you're first developing a PAO or seeking to strengthen a PAO, should the PAO cater to only one type of accountant across all sectors, or is the development of a TPO typically more targeted to just auditors? So based on your experience, what advice can you offer?
Thank you. It's a good question. What you see actually is the 2 varieties in the world, and it depends on the local circumstances. In an environment where the profession is growing initially, I would say, well, the best approach is to combine all categories in one PAO, because you need many people in committees and boards, and if the profession is small, well, it is difficult to get the good people all in those different PAOs. So try to combine forces and start with one PAO. And even in the Netherlands, we still have one PAO for all categories. It really works well. You need to organize some, and as we did, some chambers for every category: auditors, accountants in business, SME auditors, government accountants, and they all have their member groups with some regulation around it. But nevertheless, it has its advantage to be in one PAO, even in the situation in the Netherlands where we do have 22,000 members. But I see also in other countries where it works quite well, where there is, well, for every category, a separate PAO. So, but in an initial stage, I would say combine the forces.
Combine first. Okay, great. There's a follow-up question which I can ask Jennifer related to the depth and breadth of types of accountants. You mentioned accounting technicians in your Vision 2020 slide. Maybe you could help us understand why that's important to the bank and why it's important to focus on technicians.
Thank you. I mentioned about the accountancy profession, and so when we view the accountancy professions and the needs of a developing economy, and even in developed economy, any economy, you need specialists for different activities within this reporting chain when you look at the accounting and the financial reporting chain. So you have at the front the preparers, you have the bookkeepers who take care of and specialize in the data. And then you move along the chain in terms of developing reporting and then analysis. And then even in the specialist areas, then you have, let's talk about the extractive industries, which is critical in many, many of the emerging economies. So what we talk about is not just focusing on one element of the whole profession. What we need to see is you need a good supply of accounting technicians to be able to perform that function. You need good quality auditors, but not everybody is going to be an auditor that's in the accounting. And the demands and the needs of the economy, and particularly in the public service for the delivery of services, that's critical in developing the profession and the professionalization of accountancy within the public sector. And I believe that the PAOs have a critical role to advocate for that sort of chain and that spectrum of accounting professionals, from technicians through to the CFO specialization through to auditor. And it's necessary for the entire public-private partnership.
Great, thank you very much for that. Vernon, a question for you, given your broad experience with capacity building. We have a question here, if I understand correctly. There's a question about how a PAO relates to the university polytechnic education system. The question refers to hundreds of accounting graduates being produced out of the education system, but then what then? How do they then relate to the role of a PAO in building accountants?
Thank you, Sylvia. Very good and interesting question. Our experience in the many countries we've worked in is very often the PAO, unfortunately, is disconnected from the university and higher education sector. And therefore, though you may have many tens of thousands of graduates coming out with an accounting or accounting and finance degree, they do not see immediately the relevance of that into their national PAO. One of the reasons is a reason we often talk about is the PAO hasn't done effective outreach. They haven't gone to the universities, haven't made themselves known. Students don't think immediately about a career in the PAO. They want to go into banking or something else. So first of all, there's an obligation for the PAO to get out there and to talk with the universities and the students, very importantly. Secondly, and we've helped a number of PAOs do this, if you can work with your national university or other universities, higher education establishments, to make sure that that the syllabus that the university is actually following gives some credit for prior learning into the PAO professional qualification. Now, we know we have to be sensitive here. Universities are often about research and things wider than a professional qualification. But our experience is if you approach the universities correctly, you respect their academic freedom and integrity to teach the subject in a wider context, you can then demonstrate that it's in their interests, as well as their students' interests, to make some of the syllabus relevant to giving exemptions and credits into the national PAQ. And in that way, you do get a very good supply chain. And we've seen universities and higher education establishments capitalize on this in attracting students onto their courses, because those students know that when they graduate, if they wish to, they can move on to the professional accounting qualification and already be well on the way to qualification.
Thank you very much. And since we've been answering these questions, a few more questions have come in. So with your indulgence, I think I'll ask a few more from the iPad here. Jennifer mentioned public oversight, and there's also the need to have quality assurance, and there's a need to consider the balance between government and regulating accountants and the role of the profession. I wonder if I could ask you, Carolyn, what insights you might be able to provide our audience in terms of getting that right balance, and if there's one model that suits all.
Thanks for
and
that
you don't
question.
have to feel like you can answer the whole question this time.
Obviously, the issue of public oversight is now gaining prominence and momentum globally. And I would say there is no one size fits all. each jurisdiction must look at how best they can have oversight. In some of the larger economies, you can have oversight that is independent of the profession, perhaps, and also funded independently of the profession, of the accountancy profession. But in these smaller, emerging, developing economies, governments are already struggling to balance their budgets. You'll find governments are not willing, perhaps, to provide more funding for public oversight that's independent for the profession. So in that case, the profession has got to be creative. Think about how can you have oversight. You can have a start in terms of oversight, where you as a professional try as much as possible to oversight your membership, try as much as possible to ensure that perhaps in the committee you have external persons represented, majority rather than having members from the profession itself. The other model I would propose is for countries in the emerging economies is to look at how to collaborate so that they can, rather than look at oversight from a country perspective, you can look at oversight from a regional perspective.
Oh, lots of additional expert advice here. I think, Jennifer, your hand was up first.
I'd just like to add to this. This is a key area that we have as sort of for strategic focus, looking towards 2020. And you say, why will we focus on this? Well, one of the key elements if the profession has a responsibility for is to be credible, and it's to create trust. We've heard about the accountancy professional being the trusted advisor, and then also being a leader in being able to advance the development, the effective use of funds, fighting corruption, high quality reporting. But you can only do it if you're seen as a credible accounting profession and a credible accountant. Now, I think the PAOs have that role to look at and to work with the other stakeholders in regulation, not resist it. In some countries, we see a lot of resistance to saying have other stakeholders involved in the oversight. But I think you need to take a more strategic and say, what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve good outcomes in terms of the accounting and financial reporting, the auditing, and how do we do that most effectively for this nation? And that's where I think public interest, the role of the PAO in terms of having a public interest role is so important. And it's not just about serving members, it's about serving the public interest. And this is a key area I say that donors are interested in because it's part of the whole good governance approach within a country. It's about the whole approach to more effective use of resources and quality financial reporting being part of that and a part of that whole chain.
Thank you, Jennifer. Paul, did you have something additional to add?
Just one small addition. It's working? Yep. Yeah. Well, referring to Caroline's building blocks, actually, you see there is a responsibility in member added value, but also in public connectivity. And especially in this aspect, it's very good that this PAO takes its responsibility to assist government and the regulator in case they are not having sufficient experience to build up sophisticated procedures with regard to oversight on the profession, that the PAO is willing to take part, be a partner. It is the center of excellence. Usually in an emerging economy, the accounting law and the audit law are based on existing laws in other countries. So we need an oversight body. So an oversight body is created then by law, but there's no sophisticated experience yet in that oversight body. Then the PAO should take it up. Don't fight against the oversight body, but just be a partner to build up a good relationship and to make it work. And then you create your value as a PAO for society.
Thank you very much, Paul. And just to add to that, this is actually one of the more complicated topics that IFAC comes across when we try and advise young PAOs as well as their governments. There's actually a lot of resources out there. My colleague Gary Flugraf, who actually addresses public policy and regulation issues, has helped put out an IFAC public policy on how you can work towards a shared regulatory model. And in the room, there's actually a few other regulation and policy experts, including Martin Manuzzi up here from ICW and EU. So if they're open to having some more conversations about that, I'm sure they welcome you to have a chat with them. Here's a very specific question, which I think I will direct to you, Vernon. Both Vernon and Paul have made mention of the importance of having a certification examination process within a PAO. But what happens when you first introduce this? Do you take all existing accountants and make them retake an exam? Do you grandfather them in? What are examples of ways that this has been done in other countries? Vernon, are you happy to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think our experience is you have to be sensitive to national and local circumstances, and the PAO, I think, has to be sensitive to what's gone before. But if I can give you an example of one of the many I could choose from, Botswana is almost 50 years old. 2016, it will celebrate 50 years since they ceased being a British protectorate. For most of those 50 years, the Botswana Institute did not have a professional qualification of its own. So it actually relied on other qualifications. And as either people came into Botswana to work with a different qualification, or if they trained for another qualification within Botswana, as they did that, they became members by that route of the Botswana Institute. When the Botswana Institute, through capacity building, was able to develop its own professional accounting qualification, there is a cohort of students and graduates working through at the moment. We hope to see, I think, the first one come through in 2015. What they have done is actually, yes, they have done a grandfathering, so that if you're already with a professional qualification, you are part of the institute, but in future, to be a member of that institute, you will need to pass the national qualification. So it's a sensitive approach. No one is saying that it's kind of out with the old, in with the new. We have to be practical, we have to be realistic, but each country needs to think through the way forward for themselves so that you don't end up alienating people. It's not part of our role to create dissension within a country's accounting profession. The profession should be one.
Thank you. Carolyn, can I ask you a follow-up question based on that? If a PAO has grandfathered, do you think continuing education processes or continuing education requirements have a role in maintaining skills in a situation like that?
Yes, continuing education processes definitely do have a role to play, not just in the case of grandfathered, but even in those for those members who have undertaken the PAO qualification so as to qualify for membership. Remember that as a PAO, your members are serving their employers, whether these are in the public sector, whether these are in the private sector. And they need to have the right skills, the right competencies to be able to provide the services to both the private sector and the public sector. So there's definitely a need to continuously enhance your knowledge, to continuously enhance your skills, and you can only do this through continuing professional development or education programs.
Great, thank you. Now we have about 7 minutes left, and we actually have a few more questions on the iPad here, but I think I'll turn to the audience to see if anyone has a question that they wish to ask our panelists. And as I say, we actually have a microphone. So are there any, okay, we have a hand showing. And I don't have the microphone in my hands, but, oh, here, please come join us up here.
Razat Jayola is my name from Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. I'm happy to note that one of the strategic focus moving forward has to do with leveraging on IT for accountancy growth and development. I'm aware that IFAC has IEPS 2.1, titled Information Technology for Professional Accountants. To what extent has this been very useful in developing IT competence of PAOs? Has there been any monitoring mechanism? That is my question. Thank you.
Can I just clarify, you mean monitoring mechanism of the PAO or professional accountant in relation?
Of the PAOs, what have they done as far as implementing that practice statement is concerned?
Okay. The gentleman's referring to some guidance that was produced a number of years ago to address the fact that IT plays quite an important role in the work of a professional accountant and in the work of an auditor. And an auditor, as many of you will know, has to audit entities, and in auditing entities, they may have complex or simple IT systems. There isn't an active monitoring of whether POs have implemented that, because that is a practice statement, so that was optional and voluntary guidance. And actually that practice statement hasn't been looked at for a while now, so I'm actually not sure if it's up for revision. I think at IFAC itself, we've heard a lot about IT becoming a very important change and important element in the work of accountants in business and in auditors. And IFAC is actually going to be undergoing a strategic review process starting in February. So I suspect IT is going to feature somewhere there. So there might be more guidance and outcomes in the future as a result of that. But for the moment, that guidance hasn't been revised, and there was no mandatory requirement for PAOs to implement it, but it probably still serves very relevantly for many jurisdictions who want to make sure that PAOs and their members have access to information on how to deal with IT. So I hope that was sufficient. Okay, we have one. Maybe if people could show hands, anyone else who has questions. We've got one more question. Okay, so we'll take that one. Please come up. Oh, Jennifer would like to, as the gentleman's coming up, please come up.
Please come up.
Jennifer
Just
will
add,
to that.
one of the interesting things in relation to IT, if just as a source of reference, the World Bank Center for Financial Reporting, which is based in Vienna, is doing a lot of research and work in relation to IT and the leveraging of IT, and you would have seen that as one of the areas that we think is important looking to 2020. So perhaps if you wanted to go on the website for the Center for Financial Reporting, you might find some useful studies and information and learnings that have happened across the European profession, countries and so forth, just as a source of reference in relation to PIOs and implementation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Please, sir.
Distinguished Session Chairman and esteemed members of the speakers. I'm from Bangladesh, a past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Bangladesh. As we are interested, two of your distinguished panelists here present are directly involved in augmenting the public-private partnership in Bangladesh. We are grateful to both of them, in particular Mr. Bannan sir and Mrs. Jennifer. But we are seriously struggling to achieve the main outcome of our partnership. We have achieved something, but still we are to achieve something more out of that MOU that was signed in the year November 2012. It is, as we understand, this is the highest forum body. Can we hear any additional guidance which is going to add further value to our endeavors from this occasion? Thank you.
If I can just clarify, I think the question was, there's been some capacity work done, but is there any other guidance available to support a PO's growth? If that is the right question, there actually is a lot of guidance, and maybe this is an appropriate way for us to move towards our conclusion. I think in terms of just general PO development, IFAC itself actually has a guide and a toolkit that supports the growth of PAOs, and it's available on our website, and it's quite a fulsome guide. It's got appendices and case studies, and I The two young ladies up in front here are IFAC staff who are involved in developing that guidance, and they can help you find out where to access it. Oh, absolutely. Vernon wants to add something specific.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. Just very quickly. The question from the colleague from Bangladesh, I think, is particularly about a current initiative with the World Bank involvement and, to some extent, ICAW. I think in terms of the way forward, and just referring to Paul's model, a lot of this is about engaging, getting the impact with your government or regulatory authorities. And although it might be difficult and you might be starting from a low base, actually, the PAO itself has to, in a sense, grasp its responsibilities at a certain point. There's only so much that a body like the World Bank or any other PAO can do. We can be supportive, we can try and open doors, but actually this is about the sustainability, because there comes a point when it's up to the national PAO. There are sources of help around, and people in this room, I know there are many people in this room, I think through the lights I see Zubeda Rahman here, who was previously with the World Bank. He's had a lot of experience on the ground in this, so speak to Zubeda, but lots of others as well in the room I think can share. But it's about grasping your responsibility at the end of the day as a PAO, getting the help you can get, but then moving forward.
Thank you, Vernon, for that clarification. I'm conscious of time, and I know that many people are going to want to have coffee, so I think we do have a few more questions left, but I think we won't have a chance to get to them. However, the good news is, looking at these questions, I know you can find the answers by just even wandering around the World Congress site here. So before we say thank you to our panelists, I do want to invite you to make sure you visit the IFAC and Donor Project Gallery. If you haven't seen that, you head outside. I believe you turn right down a corridor. You can see all the great capacity work that's being done by PAOs and the donor community. The other thing is there was reference to a Mosaic website. If you go to the Mosaic website, and if you come by the IFAC booth, we have a little postcard with details how you can access that. You actually can click on a number of the reports and information sources that have been referred to here today. So you're going to have access to a wealth of information, not only about PO development, but real life examples of how PO development has occurred. And not only that, we still have a few more hours left of the World Congress. ICAW, I know, has a booth, so I suspect Vernon or his colleagues will be there, and perhaps that's a chance to talk to some of their experts. And I think lastly, the IFAC website itself has a wealth of resources focused on capacity building. I was mentioning we have a PO development toolkit. We actually even have a guidance document on the role of accounting technicians. And there was also other collateral materials on very specific topics, which I think can really give you a head start. So it's really not the end of this conversation. There's a lot of information out there. And please do feel free to contact any of us if you have further questions about your challenges to PO development. But with that, I would love for us to give a round of applause to our expert panels and say thank you. And with that, we will conclude this portion of the World Congress. And in recognition of the help our panelists have shown us, the host organization has a gift for them, which we'll provide to them during the coffee break. So thank you and enjoy your coffee break.